All right, like the movie The Godfather, The Wizard of Oz often provides life lessons and parallels to current events. Now watch and listen to Joe Biden closely.
You know, the rapidly rising I don't know, we should be, for example, having a circumstance where if we have the whole idea of the thing that the congressman did.
I need to buy a vowel. Okay. Well, aside from the verbal gaffes and the sentence fragments that lead to nowhere, aren't you reminded of the wizard hiding behind that curtain, trying to project a figure of his strength to the public, yet ultimately failing? Well, lucky for Joe, his staff strictly limits his interview time. And the press then blocks and tackles for him as he mutters and stumbles along, as you just saw. Now, not only did COVID give Biden cover to avoid long-form interviews and in-person events, it also allowed his campaign and other anti-Trump forces to keep distracting us with false narratives, shiny objects, and perpetual fear. Like, watch out, a second wave is coming. Start shutting everything down again. Or the COVID economy will never, ever recover. Trump rally attendees will be super spreaders. They're all selfish, they're reckless, they're dangerous, and Trump doesn't care about people's health. Remember, a week earlier, it was, wow, those massive BLM protests are inspiring. Trump will refuse to leave office if he loses. Then, of course, the distraction of the statues and the fight over all that marble. Now, the new generals of idiocracy bravely tear down monuments to old generals of the Confederacy. Now, one problem. These anti-history buffs end up defacing other monuments of people who actually worked for the abolitionist movement. Whoops. Now, all of this, as dramatic as it appears at times, it's a complete diversion. The new Bolsheviks hope you'll be so riveted by whatever spectacle, whatever pixie dust they're throwing up in the air, that you'll forget that your party is about to nominate someone who struggles with that whole subject-verb, direct-object thing.
Look, one of the things that that I think is really important is that we somehow put that back on.
Beyond the verbal and cognitive miscues, he's just a Washington dinosaur that roamed the swamp for, what, 40 years or so, and yet failed to make any meaningful structural changes to our supposedly almost irredeemably corrupt system. So why didn't Obama and Biden do big, meaningful initiatives on the issues of race and policing? After Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, they could have rallied Congress. Instead, they tossed out crumbs to satisfy their angry activists. Now, Obama's a smart guy. In his heart of hearts, he has to know that his own record of policy accomplishments for inner-city America is kind of scant. But still, he's making a guest appearance, I saw, to sell the Biden illusion next week at a virtual fundraiser. You have to make a donation, by the way, to attend, so watch out. Now, this will be hyped by the media as if it's Jesus' return to Nazareth, okay? But newsflash, I hate to break it to you, Obama won't be president again. And with all the challenges before us, we need to kind of know exactly who'll be behind that Biden screen, moving all the levers. Oh, Biden can't be the understudy to the guy who was his for 8 years. So what do you do when you don't have a better economic record than Trump and you're running against Trump? Or a better record on race, for that matter?
Juneteenth is the oldest celebration of the end of slavery in the United States. It's time we elevate this.
July 4th, 1776, not everybody was free in celebrating their Independence Day. So here's our day. And if you love us, it'll be your day too.
All right, Juneteenth, they want that to be a holiday. And I'd say just, okay, fine. But pay no attention to the untold damage that Northam's draconian lockdown rules are still doing to businesses and families, especially minority and immigrant-owned. And yet he thinks that he can wipe away all of that with symbols and celebrities? It's just more distraction. Now, their next trick is to launch a desperate campaign to cast President Trump, though, as the villain who threatens us all. They don't like him as a person, so what they have to do is deny that he's done anything at all good for America. And of course, they need to call him racist, with zero evidence. Here was Congressman Jim Clyburn with our own Brett Baier earlier tonight.
What about the First Step Act or opportunity zones?
His son-in-law came up and worked with people to get the bill done, and the president signed it. But don't tell me
Congressman, he did it. I mean, the administration did it. It wasn't the Obama administration.
I didn't come here to argue with you, but you can argue it if you want to.
But you're not giving the Trump administration any credit for the things that Senator Tim Scott has said it should get credit for.
Absolutely not. I'm not, because he doesn't deserve it.
I mean, first of all, Brett Baier wasn't trying to pick a fight with him. It was doing this thing called asking a follow-up question. But again, pay no attention to Trump's actual accomplishments, the outcomes. None of it. Just ignore it all. And instead, stick with this twisted fantasy that President Trump is really, in his heart of hearts, wants to work against people of color.
Some Democrats go as far as to call the president racist. Can you address that from your perspective?
You know, it's a sad state of affairs, but in my experience, it's always been the way the Democrats play politics against Republicans. All Republicans are racist and rich. When the truth of the matter is, it's about results. He was elected because people want to see something real and not just get lied to by politicians.
And you could tell today in watching President Trump that he was extremely moved by meeting with the families of men killed by police.
Your loved ones will not have died in vain. We are one nation, we grieve together, and we heal together. I can never imagine your pain or the depth of your anguish, but I can promise to fight for justice for all of our people.
And some of the families seemed moved as well.
I was very, very emotional throughout the whole conference. He was very compassionate. He showed major concerns for all families, not just one family, but for all families. I can say that President Trump was very receiving. He listened and he addressed each and every family accordingly.
Now, the rest of the media, they won't dwell on that, okay, because it doesn't fit their narrative. It was really good for President Trump to meet with those families. And by the way, no cameras in the room. Just a chance to listen to them, hear their views on the best path forward. I think we sometimes forget in the bitterness of today's politics, and I'm sure I'm guilty here, that we're all human. You know, sometimes we smile, sometimes we weep, sometimes we celebrate, sometimes we grieve. Those families are grieving. President Trump should be judged by his commitment and his actions and his results that he's delivering to all Americans, especially the most disadvantaged. And while I realize there are some who just don't like his sometimes brash style or sometimes tough response to critics on Twitter, don't let those style issues distract you either. It's just completely a waste of time. This man has risked everything to fight for American workers, while Biden has basically always carried water for China and its buddies, the open borders crowd. And by the way, the president knows how to make the economy work for the average American. He has and he will again, while Biden was simply going to do whatever the left wants. He can't control AOC or Ilhan Omar or any of the other radicals on the streets. Won't even try. And finally, Trump has a realistic understanding of China and the EU, while the former vice president is ludicrously naive about both. Now, how hard is it to imagine Biden doing his own version of Obama's post-Bush 2009 apology tour? And while Joe's busy apologizing, China and the EU will clean his and our clock. Now, just like Dorothy and friends, Americans will be disappointed as it becomes apparent that Biden, behind that curtain, won't make their wishes come true. He's just the Wizard of Oz. And that's the angle.